Hey, can you guys hear me in the chat? Trying this. This is new for me, so bear with me. Okay, we're just going to go for it. Doing something a little bit new today. I'm trying to do this live. Usually I don't do it that way. I have a whole way that I go about making these that's a little bit more polished, but we're going to skip that today. And I'm going to do this live because I think it'll save me time editing, and hopefully that'll be a little bit more efficient across the board. Just a couple things that I wanted to talk about today that were pretty interesting that just kind of like dovetail nicely off of a video I did over the weekend. This Ross Coulthard thing, has anybody else been following this as closely as I have? This is pretty interesting. Ross gave a presentation at the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies just 2 days ago. And during this presentation, let's see if I can pull this up. That's not the thing I want to show you. Hold on a second. During this presentation, I'm telling you straight out, this thing is going to be clunky as hell, this broadcast. So just bear with me. Whoops, that's not what I want to do. Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies is a group in Huntsville, Alabama, that basically is trying to put together a cohesive scientific look at the UAP phenomena. And Ross was there to give a presentation, which was about 90 minutes long. It was really interesting. I did a breakdown of it over the weekend. I was trying to show you the website, but I can't pull it up right this second because I don't, I don't really know what I'm doing, and I'm doing this live, so I'm a little clunky. But during the presentation, it was basically about the things that have convinced him that the phenomena is real and that there's a real there, and for him to stake his career and his reputation on it, and basically back this horse. It was a really fascinating speech, and he cites a number of really interesting pieces of information. But in the beginning of that video, I made a little sidestep to talk about some other interesting things that go on in Huntsville, Alabama. And one of those things is the amount of, weirdly, anti-gravity researchers who have lived in Huntsville, Alabama, called it home, and then mysteriously disappeared are no longer around in Huntsville. And I count two specifically: Dr. Ning Lee, who was an anti-gravity researcher who disappeared in 1999, I believe, and it's been widely suspected that Dr. Ning Lee was recruited to go to China and work for their program. And there's a whole side conversation about that. And then there's another person, another researcher named Dr. Amy Eskridge, who worked for and ran an organization called, I have it here, the Institute for Exotic Science. And the Institute for Exotic Science has a really interesting mission, which is to take some of the really advanced stuff that a lot of these NASA researchers were working on and try to commercialize it outside of the pipeline that NASA is using. So as I understand it, and I'm not an expert on this at all, but as I understand it, this was research that NASA looked at and then decided not to pursue for one reason or another. And they were basically saying, but there's still pathways here. And they wanted to chase those down and see what could be done about some of that technology that they were working on. So I mentioned that in the Ross Coulthard video, and when I mentioned it, it got a lot of attention. People really perked up at that. Apparently, a lot of you were paying attention to Amy's story, and there was a lot of really interesting discussion about that. So I did a little bit more digging, and I actually found some stuff. And one of the things that I found a couple of videos that I think you'll find interesting. One is Amy giving a presentation to a room full of aerospace people and researchers, basically pitching them on the idea of what the Institute for Exotic Science is about and why her research into anti-gravity is legitimate and should be taken seriously. I found that presentation, which is really interesting. And I also found this, what appears to be a presentation deck that Amy wrote. And it looks like it's about, oh, what is this? 35 pages long. And I honestly haven't even gone through the whole thing yet. I just kind of like thumbed it. But when I did, let's see if I can pull this up for you. I'm coming back to the Ross thing in just a second. Here's the Institute for Exotic Science. We'll go through this in just a second. But when I went through it, there's some really interesting stuff in here. I think you're really going to find this amazing. But first, let's talk about Ross Coulthard. Ross tweeted something this morning about, he basically tweeted a link to a paper on cryptoterrestrials. This is a paper I've got right here. Let me pull this up for you. Here we go. The Cryptoterrestrial Hypothesis, a case for scientific openness to a concealed earthly explanation for unidentified anomalous phenomena, by Tim Lomas at Harvard, Brendan Case, Harvard, and Michael Paul Masters, Montana Tech of the University of Montana. Article in Philosophy and Cosmology, June 2024. This is the PDF here, so I'll put a link to this in the show notes when I'm done with all this. I haven't, this is 64 pages long. I haven't had a chance to go through it all, but I skimmed it a little bit this morning, and I'm going to try to do a deeper dive into this later in the week. But a few interesting things jumped out in just the first couple of pages, and I'm going to go through and just read a few things to you. Real quick, the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis is basically the notion that when you start from a position of there's something strange in your neighborhood, the question then becomes, where is it coming from? Is it coming from outer space? Is it coming from the future? Is it coming from the moon? Where is it coming from? Yeah, specifically UAPs, UFOs, orbs, all these strange things that we collectively kind of refer to as the phenomena or phenomenon, depending on what you're talking about. What is the origin? And then based on what kind of origin you're looking at, you can start to chase down that idea and figure out where it leads you. And so the kind of dominant idea for a number of decades has been the extraterrestrial hypothesis. And this makes perfect sense. People see strange lights in the sky. They assume that it's some type of a spacecraft. Certainly from the evidence that we've seen so far, there's a lot of evidence to support the notion that these are advanced spacecraft coming from somewhere else and crashing here or being brought down on our planet. But there are other possible origins that we can look at as well. And one of those is the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis. And there's a great book by Mac Tanis, who I referred to this book in my, I just did one on book recommendations the other day. And the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis, this is a book that's referred to in this paper, but among many other things, basically says that what if there's an advanced progenitor civilization that came about on Earth in our past, and that it has been living in a basically either a shadow biosphere or some kind of extreme stealth right here alongside us on this planet for however long we've been here. They're older than us, have more advanced technology, but completely unknown to us. And they make the case in this paper that that is possible. It's not the most likely possibility by their estimation. It's about a 10% likelihood that this may be what's going on. But they say that just a few years ago, they ranked the possibility of a cryptoterrestrial origin for a lot of UAP and UFO sightings as 1%. So by one metric, you could look at it and say now they're 10 times more certain that this is a possibility than they were initially. But this is the basic premise here. It starts out, recent years have seen increasing public attention and indeed concern regarding unidentified anomalous phenomena. Hypotheses for such phenomena tend to fall into two classes: a conventional terrestrial explanation, human made technology, or an extraterrestrial explanation, advanced civilizations from elsewhere in the cosmos. However, there is also a third minority class of hypothesis, an unconventional terrestrial explanation outside the prevailing consensus view of the universe. This is the ultra terrestrial hypothesis, which includes a subset, the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis, namely the notion that UAP may reflect activities of intelligent beings concealed in stealth here on Earth, like underground, for example, or near its environs, for example, the moon, and or even walking among us, passing as humans. Although this is likely to be regarded skeptically by most scientists, such are the nature of some UAP that we argue this is a possibility, or this possibility should not be summarily dismissed, and instead deserves genuine consideration in a spirit of epistemic humility and openness. Sorry. Um, I'm okay. I'm taking a second to read these chats while you guys are typing this. Yes, I am Clint, Fast Man Majama. That's me. Uh, ChatGPT knows all the Richard Dolan stuff. Okay, so welcome everybody. These are great. Bear with me while I find my sea legs here. I'm trying to figure out how to like juggle this whole presentation and talk to everybody and read the chats at the same time. It's a lot. And my brain is like, there's sparks flying out of my head. So back to this paper. They have a bunch of interesting perspectives here. They make some really great points to kind of lay out the case in the beginning of the paper. And again, I'll link to this PDF in the show notes so you guys can take a look at the whole thing. And we're not going to go through everything here today, but just really quick. Um, One quote that I highlighted here for you is, however, such are the strange nature of some UAP that people are also contemplating other possibilities. To that point, the linguistic nuance around this topic is intriguing, particularly the emphasis on non human intelligence in the proposed Disclosure Act, where it appeared 22 times and was defined as any sentient, quote, any sentient, intelligent, non human life form, regardless of nature or ultimate origin, that may be presumed responsible for unidentified anomalous phenomena or of which the federal government has become aware. This wording implies the two classes of explanation above are not the only possible ones. In fact, key figures have made this very point, including Grush. We're going to unpack this in just a second. Interviewed by Ross Coulthard on News Nation in 2023, when asked if the government had been concealing the existence on this planet of alien life, David Grush pointedly clarified, quote, I would couch it as non-human intelligence because I don't necessarily want to denote origin, which kind of suggests he knows what the origin is. He goes on, I don't think we have all the data to say, oh, they're coming from a certain location. Moreover, in another interview, Grush made some intriguing comments about the NHI involved with the alleged crash retrieval program being, quote, this is really interesting, actually not that much more advanced than you and I, saying, if I was a betting man, some of these NHI, they're similarly as advanced as us, but they just made asymmetric evolution or whatever. They went a different path. Where we made nuclear weapons and stuff, they ended up making this civil propulsion kind of equivalent discovery where they're able to do this now. So that's a really interesting point. And basically, they're kind of referring to this new language, right? This new vocabulary that we've been hearing since about 2017. Unidentified anomalous phenomena. Super vague, but definitely specifying what we're all looking at when we're looking at UFOs and UAPs. Non-human intelligence. They don't say alien, they say non-human. That's really interesting. So they're not saying extraterrestrial, they're saying non-human. And they make the people who are saying these things go to great pains to make that nuance clear. So they are really trying to like hammer that home And that's really interesting. And I think this really is an interesting quote from David Grush, suggesting that they're not much more advanced than you and I. Um, that's an interesting possibility. What do you guys think about that? How much more advanced are we talking about? I have this interesting, like, I've noticed a lot lately people saying that these non-human intelligences, they just kind of assume they must be millions of years beyond us in some extravagant way, and that just because of that fact that we can assume certain things about them, like there's no danger here, and that everything's going to be just fine because if you were a million years more advanced or 10 million years more advanced from where we were, surely you would have higher morality, better morality. And I just don't know if I'm convinced that that's the case. Let's see here. What do you guys have to say? 30 feet deep. And some abductees have just discussed, you because it's so weird, there's just so much weirdness around a lot of the sightings and a lot of the experiences that people report. It's really hard to pin down exactly what's happening and where these people are when they're taken, if they're being abducted or if they're experiencers and they're being taken on board a ship or contactees. But there have been cases where people have talked about being in what they describe as a subterranean cavern or some kind of underground facility, which I think is really interesting. And I have another person that I've been working on a video about recently who said something similar to what Grush said. This is someone who supposedly worked at S4 as a biologist on some of the biological samples from some of these NHI biologics. And this person said they were very adamant that they weren't they were not aliens. They were extraterrestrial, but he said not aliens. That's a very specific thing. Interdimensionals. I don't know. Interdimensional. That's one thing they talk about here is the interdimensional thing. Here's another little quote that I pulled for you. Indeed, such is the deeply strange nature of UAP that people seem compelled, even against their own objections, to consider these alternatives. Consider Gary Nolan, an immunologist with an endowed chair at Stanford who has for the past decade been involved in UAP research. In an interview with Nolan on Spotlight, Coulthard posed a similar question to the one he asked Grush and received a comparably ambiguous answer. Quote, you believe on the evidence that there is a non-human intelligence of advanced technology on this planet? Nolan replied, quote, advanced capabilities. No, I don't know whether it's a technology per se, because I'm leaving open the idea that it's some form of consciousness that is non-material. And I know, say to my colleagues out there, this sounds absolutely crazy, but if you've seen the things that I've seen, you would only be able to come to a similar conclusion. Thus, some data relating to UAP are seemingly so extraordinary that people are forced to think outside the box and consider possible ultra-terrestrial explanations. So that's another interesting perspective, that maybe there is a non-physical intelligence that is operating adjacent to us, but we can't see it. Within the broad ultra-terrestrial category, one theory or collection of theories, if differentiated in a fine-grained way, is the interdimensional hypothesis, of which Carl Nell offers 14 different variations, though he only positions some of these as ultra-terrestrial. They're referring to Carl Nell's Soul Foundation presentation. This suggests UAP may involve beings from dimensions that coexist alongside the four dimensions of space-time humans usually perceive. Indeed, following the briefing on Grush that members of Congress received from the ICIG on January 12, Representative Luna said, quote, I think it's important to listen to the specific words that Grush uses. Grush never said extraterrestrial or alien. He said interdimensional. On a similar theme, Ron James, director of media relations for UFO research group MUFON, claims he has been informed by intelligence insiders of, quote, a very large contingent, end quote, of biblically minded people within the Pentagon who have sought to shut down investigations into UAP based on the fear that these may actually involve demons coming from hell. Honestly, that's the last thing we need is for Jesus freaks to get involved in this. That's really the last thing we absolutely need. I hope that's not where this is going. It's going to just get so weird. It's already weird enough. Another quote, a less well-known but perhaps even more striking case was divulged by Lou Elizondo, a former intelligence officer closely linked to U.S. investigations into UAP involving a military encounter in the Caribbean in which a circular object about the size of a small island rose up from the deep on two separate occasions. They're talking here about the cryptoterrestrial concept and some supporting evidence for this. And one of the things that they cite is this quote from Lou Elizondo saying that there was a craft the size of a small island seen emerging from the ocean on two separate occasions. And they also refer to some comments that Admiral Tim Gallaudet had about submersible or underwater, undersea objects that have been clocked at traveling almost 3,000 miles an hour underwater. I think 2,900 miles an hour. Discussing Grush's allegations, Representative Mike Gallagher in 2023 noted that one potential explanation for UAP is, quote, an ancient civilization that's just been hiding here for all this time and is suddenly showing itself right now, with numerous seemingly well-informed individuals making similar comments. So most notably, they refer here to Mac Tani's Cryptoterrestrials, a meditation on indigenous humanoids and the aliens among us, as one of the people who've kind of proposed this theory very strongly. Similarly, claims related to the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis can be found included within various UAP-related texts. In his book, The NASA Conspiracies, for example, by Redfern, includes an interview with someone seemingly associated with the Gemini program who claimed there was a small band of individuals who represent the last vestiges of an ancient, advanced, isolated civilization responsible for the legends of Atlantis and similar stories, forced by circumstance to retreat into remote, sequestered locales for their survival. Indeed, comparable testimony continues to emerge that lends further support to this CTH. An example is the apparent testimony of Dr. Shirley Wright, Albert Einstein's assistant in 1947, speaking in 1993 in recordings which only became public in 2021. Wright claimed she and Einstein had helped investigate the famous Roswell UAP crash. Incredibly, she said this was not only a genuine UAP, but that biological entities had survived the crash and were subjected to questioning. Most relevantly here, she suggested these were actually just humans, but an advanced form. And as Verna summarizes it, that many of their species actually reside underground on our planet. On that point, former CIA officer John Ramirez, see, they even bring John Ramirez into this, claimed that the authorities conducted biological tests and were able to sequence something in those bodies that looked like a genome. And from there, they checked the human genome and saw the correlations. It goes on and on. We're on page 7, and this goes on for 64 pages. So I'm not gonna go through the whole thing, but I'll link to it in the show notes if you guys want to check it out. It's an interesting perspective. What do you think? Cryptoterrestrial hypothesis. Is it possible that what we're dealing with here is not from out there, but instead from right here? And what would be weirder for you? Would it be weirder? I mean, think about it. What's more frightening? Being invaded by aliens from someplace else? Or, I'm not necessarily saying this has to be frightening, but what would unsettle you more, right? Aliens coming from somewhere else to here, or finding out that we are not the masters of this planet the way that we thought we were. There's actually another civilization that precedes us that's been here this whole time. And not only that, but they're way more advanced than we are. And if they wanted to, they could take control at any time. We're kind of living on their world, and maybe that's what's going on. It's interesting because I got a little pushback from my Coulthard commentary video on a statement that I made about the potential threat represented by NHI. And I was trying to articulate that position in a way that made sense. And I think if I had to explore it a little bit more deeply, what I would say is this. Deep down, my hope is that we find ourselves in a situation of peaceful contact with an advanced civilization that we can learn from, and that peaceful contact results in the demilitarization of our globe and our culture in a positive way. So a positive outcome for humankind. I'm on team human. Okay. So just out of the gate, I'm on team human. I am a human. Hopefully all you guys are humans too, mostly, more or less. So I'm on team human. That's where I start from. So my hope is for a positive outcome for mankind or humankind. But I haven't heard or seen enough evidence to support the case that, or the argument that what we're dealing with has our best interests at heart. I just haven't heard that argument made convincingly. That's all I'm saying. There are people in this space who will look you straight in the eye, and some people get really combative about it. They'll get like pushy about this, and they'll say, they're so advanced. How could they possibly pose a threat to us? If they wanted to do something to harm us, they could have done it anytime. Why haven't they done it? To which I say, how do you fucking know? How would anyone know? All we can talk about in this space is how much we don't know. No one knows anything. Or the people who do know, they're not telling. But what we do know is that a lot of people are super freaked out. We know that. And we know that they get really nervous and cagey when it comes up. We know that a lot of people have been murdered to keep these secrets secret. That's important. We know that there's a Cold War on to reverse engineer some of this technology, which is an inherently dangerous situation. We know our planet is fully nuclearized and could go up in flames at any moment. So we're already in a very unstable situation. And it makes sense that people would be a little nervous. So I'm just acknowledging that. I think that's important. I don't think it's wise to just say we can assume that these things are peaceful and they have our best interests at heart. We don't know. And until we do know, I'm going to stand by that statement. I think it's just important to maintain a level of cautious optimism, but cautious is important. There's an important, you need a hefty spoonful, generous dose of caution with all of this. Our own history of colonization on this planet shows that when a more advanced society comes into contact with a less advanced society, it rarely works out well for the less advanced society. That's been true in every case. So we know that that's the history we have to work with, and that's the knowledge that we have to work with. It's important that we take that seriously and give it a strong look. There's no reason to think that it would be different just because beings that we're in contact with are coming from some far away place that's much farther than we suspected. And I don't see any reason to think it would be any different if it was a civilization that preceded our own, that was somehow subterranean or living in some kind of a shadow biosphere. So to that extent, I think that that's my position. People say, well, they're always seen around our nuclear facilities deactivating our nuclear weapons. They'll switch off our nuclear missiles. They turn off our weapons technology. They scramble our fighter jets. Their sensors. They try to disrupt our military capability, which could be seen as a peaceful gesture, or it could be seen as a show of force, right? And there were hundreds and hundreds of nuclear weapons tests that happened from the period of the late 40s all the way up until recently. And I've never really heard anything about non-human intelligences interfering with these nuclear tests, many of which were underground or underwater. So if you go, there's a video that you can watch, and I'll see if I can find it, where they just show a time lapse of all the nuclear tests that have happened on this planet since we started doing it. And it's enough that if you did them all at once, if you just set them all off at once, that would be it. So if nuclear weapons exploding is a concern, then what happened with all of our nuclear tests? How come those were never stopped? I have questions there. So that's kind of my position. But as I said, I would love nothing more than peaceful, open contact with an advanced civilization. What I want for us is to get to a Star Trek post-capitalist utopia. That's what I'd love to see, where we're post-scarcity. We live in a peak human society where everybody can achieve their highest potential. Everybody's fit. Everybody's got comfortable shit on all the time. It's always 75 degrees everywhere you go. It's great. Think about it. Use technology to solve all our problems. Nobody gets sick anymore. Nobody's starving. We have clean water. Everybody's got enough energy. Everybody can do what you want. You can hang out at home and do full dive virtual reality, holodeck, frickin' Samurai Village games all day. Or you can do join Starfleet and go out and explore the cosmos and build your prestige that way. It'd be really interesting. But who knows? So anyway, the cryptoterrestrial hypothesis, I think it's really interesting. Certainly we have one planet here we're looking at that definitely has life on it, Earth. It not only has life on it, has a lot of life. It's exploding with life and has been for a long time. It's 4.5 billion years old. There's been enough time for many advanced civilizations to come and go with 1 million years in between them with no idea that either one existed. And certainly it's possible that life could have originated here, become advanced, developed space technology, left this planet, gone off to the moon, set up shop there, gone on to Mars and into deep space for all we know. We just don't know. In fact, it's across the room or I'd go get it, but I have a copy of Ingo Swann's book, Penetration, over here. Ingo Swann is a remote viewer who worked with Hal Puthoff. By the way, a lot of this stuff is based on Hal Puthoff's work as well, this paper that I'm talking about. But Ingo Swann was a remote viewer who worked on the original Stargate program with Hal Puthoff, and he remote viewed sites on the moon and says in his book Penetration that there is 100% activity happening on the moon right now. He said there's activity on the surface, there's activity underneath the surface. He said that there has been an organized campaign to basically withhold information about activity happening on the moon and potentially on Mars as well for decades and decades. And that book was written in the 90s, I think late 90s, before he passed away. So I think there's a there. What do you guys think? How would that change your perspective if there was if it turns out when it's all said and done that the big secret is that we're really not alone. We're really not alone like here, and they could take charge anytime. How would that affect your views of authority? How would that affect your view of your society if suddenly we learned that that there's a much, much, much more powerful advanced civilization living beneath the surface? I believe it was the Admiral Byrd expedition, if somebody can check me on the dates on this, that went down to Antarctica. And then there was, they lost hundreds of people, a number of ships, supposedly encountered an advanced society down there that had an opening that accessed a deep cave system that penetrated deeply into the earth and allowed them to come and go. That's an interesting case as well. Okay, so moving on. Amy Eskridge, anti-gravity researcher, Huntsville, Alabama, founded an organization called the Institute for Exotic Science. Take a look at this. Here we go. This is so I literally was just Googling around. I was going around, actually. You can't Google things anymore. You have to DuckDuckGo. Pro tip, if you didn't know that, Google's not going to help you anymore. You've got to go to DuckDuckGo and you do all your UFO related research through DuckDuckGo, and you'll be able to actually get to some of the links that Google buries and hides and won't let you access. But this is a really interesting one that came up when I searched for Amy Eskridge and, in quotes, Institute for Exotic Science. A historical perspective on anti-gravity technology. Here it is. Amy Eskridge, President, Institute for Exotic Science. The Institute for Exotic Science is a public benefit corporation specializing in quantum computing, gravity modification, metamaterial science, and communications, Huntsville based with international co-founders and collaborators. For those of you who didn't see that video that I did mentioning Amy, basically the deal with Amy Eskridge is this. She ran this organization in Huntsville, Alabama. Her father worked for NASA, at least as far as we can tell. A lot of this is based on some rumors, and it's sort of a murky internet mystery. But from what I've been able to gather, she gave a presentation on a podcast. She did an interview, and on this interview, this hair is driving me crazy. On this interview, she appeared to be intoxicated. I think that's fair. And she makes some pretty crazy claims. She says that she knows a number of researchers who have developed functional anti-gravity devices that are the first of their kind, unique in the world. You turn them on, they work the first time exactly like you thought they would. They produce real results, and then if you apply for more funding from NASA to study the technology further, the divestment office at NASA cancels your project, takes the materials and auctions them, and scrap metal vendors buy them, melt them down, and sell them for scrap. I'm assuming because a lot of exotic metals are used in the construction of some of these devices. So that's the case that she was making. And she goes on to say that she knows a number of researchers who were suicidal over this because they had developed real anti-gravity technology that demonstrated actual promise, and their projects were canceled. And then after giving that interview, she mysteriously passes away under strange circumstances. So this presentation I'm showing you because it's really interesting what's in it. And this little slide deck, here it is. Amy's on the left. Looks like Chantel Butler, Nate Close, creative director, Sam Reed, Richard Eskridge, Paul Handy. Holocron Engineering, Huntsville-based father-daughter company with expertise in gravity modification and research and development. There's Amy, chemist, entrepreneur, Richard Eskridge, retired NASA engineer and scientist. Okay, so check this out. This gets really interesting. The first few slides just sort of break down what we're dealing with. Gravity, a fundamental physical force that is responsible for interactions which occur because of mass between particles, between aggregations of matters, such as stars and planets, between particles, such as photons, and aggregations of matter that is 10 to 39 times the strength of the strong force and that extends over infinite distances, but is dominant over macroscopic distances, especially between aggregations of matter. So she's laying out sort of technical terminology. That's not what I'm focused on here. I'm not a physicist, so I'm just straight up telling you I have no expertise to really be breaking this down. But what I think is really interesting is she goes sort of through the history of anti-gravity research. And I believe this is the deck that she's using in the presentation she gives in the longer video that I referred to earlier. I think this is the one. So here we go on slide 11, Nikola Tesla's space drive, 1928. Here's the flying saucer. Patent number 1600, let's see, what is this? 1655144, a space drive or anti-electromagnetic propulsion system. Electropulsation, dynamic theory of gravity. Matter is made up of whirls of ether. rejects notion of curved space-time. So she goes through these different concepts of how to sort of tackle the issue of gravity and how to approach anti-gravity research. Serial generator, 1946, claimed combination of anti-gravity and free energy device, widely panned, still in development. The Dean drive, reactionless drive, claimed to produce propulsion without propellant exhaust. Linear oscillating mechanism. The Wallace machine, 1968, spinning brass discs, aligns nuclear spin. And then we get to modern efforts. And what do we see? What does that look like? Anyone? Bueller? Restricted research by the DoD, the Mansfield Amendment, 1973. Restricted research by the DoD for non-military applications included anti-gravity research. This means most modern anti-gravity research has been outsourced to the private sector and or black budgets. Sound familiar? The Hutchinson effect, Woodward effect. Here we go. Slide 24. Ning Li and Doug Torr, AC Gravity, 1990s. I remember this. I remember seeing press releases about this back in the 90s. University of Alabama Huntsville scientist Dr. Ning Li, who theorized a magnetic field applied to a superconductor will align ion spins to produce gravitomagnetic and gravitoelectric effect. 1999 Popular Mechanics article. UAH and NASA MSFC collaboration, 1996. Left UAH and founded AC Gravity LLC in 1999. Got a $500,000 DoD contract in 2001. What happened to Ning Li? She goes from physics professor and researcher at Alabama, then starts her own company to develop her technological breakthrough. Then she signs a contract with DARPA, then no trace after that. The Podkletnov effect. This is something we talked about in that Ross Coulthard video. Morningstar Applied Physics. Boeing Phantom Works, 2010s. Gravity Research for Advanced Propulsion System, GRASP. Admitted in 2014. Podkletnov is a collaborator, question mark. TR-3B Black Triangle, alien reproduction vehicle is the result. Mechanism resembles brown generator, question mark. And then there's this really interesting picture of what appears to be the TR-3B. Black Triangle, which Ross Coulthard mentions in the first 10 minutes, 5 minutes of his presentation at the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. Really interesting, right? So, what do you think? That's really weird, right? Like there's some kind of a weird connection going on here. Like why is Ross Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies? Why Huntsville, Alabama? Why is Ning Li, Amy Eskridge? What's going on there? What's that connection? Does anybody else know anything about this? I think it's a really interesting story. I don't really have a lot of detail on this. I just have what I've been able to Google and find, but I think it's really interesting. All right, let's take a look at the chat and see what you guys have to say. Oh, all right. Teresa's here. Cool. Miss K. Consciousness talks. No one understands it. It's so fun to throw in buzzwords like AI, but AI, at least we understand for now. Do we? Do we understand AI? We may find the Christian religion, Teresa Bailey, we may find the Christian religion may have been worshiping the wrong God. This type of info would be what would cause a major ontological shock to those with such beliefs. Good point. A civilization that could mentor us. Could we be mentored by a civilization? Like, do we have like that? I could see that being a real kerfuffle, right? Like to use a strong word. That's a real problem. If we're not the only advanced society on this planet, we're actually the B team. And we've kind of built this whole surface civilization, and we're sort of kind of on our way out into the stars a little bit. And we've sort of got this destructive economic model that consumes Earth's natural resources and then shits out microplastics and forever chemicals and iPhones. And we're really addicted to it. And there's like 20, 30 people who kind of own everything and they're not interested in giving it up. And then one day you find out that there's this advanced civilization that's like living underneath the surface. Maybe, I don't know how deep they'd have to be, or maybe they're on the moon, or maybe they're on Mars, but this is their planet. And they're very much convinced that it's time for us to go. Or maybe it's time for us to take our proper place in the pecking order. That's possible. That would unsettle everybody instantly. Starslinger, I'm with you, Clint. I don't think they are necessarily here for our benefit, but they're not here to destroy us either. At best, they seem rather neutral towards us, and at worst, they abduct us. That's true. That would suck. Yeah, the abduction thing is really weird. That's a weird one. I've heard another interesting cryptoterrestrial hypothesis, which was basically that, and this one's kind of recent, the mycelium network underneath the surface of our soil, there is a mycelium network that constitutes the largest single living organism in the world. It essentially connects the entire globe as one gigantic super brain. And I if anyone knows more about this than what I just said, please educate me a little more. But this is a rough idea of something I heard recently, and I'm trying to remember the basic gist of it. But it was like, imagine if all of the mycelium, which is the white stuff when you walk in the forest and you kick over an old tree stump, and then there's like mushrooms, and then there's like this white material that sort of looks like spider webs underneath it growing into the ground. That is mycelium. And that network could be intelligent. It could be one gigantic super brain. And that super brain could be trying to communicate with us in a language that we can understand. And maybe it does that by sort of projecting these hallucinations into your mind that look like an abduction or look like some kind of a weird contact event, but may actually just be some sort of weird telepathic communication that we don't understand happening. And so people are just so completely flummoxed by it that they interpret it using the cultural language of their time, which might explain some of the weird historical sightings and things that people have reported seeing in the past. I think that's interesting. Alminius, I agree with caution, but I would also have a healthy dose of caution for humans in power. Humans don't always have humans' best interests at heart. Okay, that's a really fair point. And yes, I agree with you. This is super important. And I want to be clear. I'm on Team Human, but I'm not very optimistic about Team Human. Like I, I'm invested because I'm here. I think we're all very heavily invested in the survival of our species. We should be, but we will not survive with the current leadership that we have, and the model that we're running cannot sustain itself. Right, like the software of our society cannot sustain itself. There's no way we get out of this next 100 years intact the way that we're all thinking we should. I think happy, healthy, self-actualized human beings in a technological paradise where we can, be free of disease and hunger and starvation and war and violence and fear and all of that. We're not getting there with this system, not with capitalism, not with a consumer culture that has to constantly consume the planet and make new cars and shittier highway systems and crappier subways, and just, I don't see it. And if you look at what's going on, I'm not trying to get political with this, but I am a parent. And as a parent, you can't look at the Gaza situation right now without just feeling your stomach turn inside out. It's disgusting to watch the amount of violence that is being perpetrated in this part of the world. And I don't care what your politics are. Like, it's just like team human, right? Let's just step back for a second. Forget about politics and just go like, are we all humans? Do we all feel pain? Do we all feel joy? Do you feel happiness? Do you laugh? Do you cry? Do you have, okay, well, so does everyone else. And if you can start there, you can look at what's going on in the world and you can go, this is fucked up. This is fucking horrifying. We're terrifying people. Like, humanity is terrifying. I get that. I'm totally on board with that line of reasoning as well. And I can see a lot of reasons why we would be sequestered away and kind of um, advanced alien civilizations might not want anything to do with us because we might be worse than the fucking Klingons. You want, like one case of this is meatloaf. Meatloaf. Think about meatloaf, right? We all eat meatloaf, or you've had meatloaf in your life. What is meatloaf? We take animals, we grind them into a paste, and not just one animal at a time. We grind 100 animals, hundreds of them, grind them into a paste and squirt them into a pack and sell them to each other. And then we take that and bake it in an oven, ketchup on it. We eat it. And that's meatloaf. And that's like totally normal for our species. That's horrifying. Like, if you can you imagine if you went to another planet and someone was like, well, what kind of things do you eat on Earth? And you were like, well, meatloaf. What's meatloaf? Can you imagine trying to explain this to an alien? We're horrifying people. Humans are scary. We started using WMDs. Now they're here going, no, yeah, yeah. Network relays information from plant to plant. Mushrooms, the underground internet. Yeah, yeah. That's Paul Stamets that talks about that a lot. Yeah, if you want to really, when you start to see like drone footage of factory farming, and I'm a person who eats meat, and I don't want to eat meat anymore. Like, I really don't, and I just am not. I'm not a good enough vegetarian chef to like replace everything that I only know how to make like 6 things. So it's hard. But the way we factory farm our food and the way that we factory farm, we just treat livestock, it's awful. We don't have meatloaf in the UK. We are safe. I'm vegan. It's a moral issue for me. Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. Amoeba ingest one another. Very simple life forms. Yeah. Yeah, it's a really interesting conversation, and I don't think there's a really easy answer. It's very it's complex. There's a lot going on. I think at the end of the day, if you can take anything away from it, it's that, do you guys feel like we're on a roller coaster? And so far, it's like we've been on that part of the roller coaster where it's like tick, 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 and it's like clicking up and you're going up, 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 up. And it's like, okay, it's nice and slow. You look down, there's like the hot dog thing, and then there's like the people, and there you can see the entrance over there, you can see the parking lot, and you're like, oh, cool. Oh, we're actually kind of high. This is kind of scary. And then you get to the very top, and then there's like that minute where you just kind of sit there for like 30 seconds and nothing happens. And you know right then and there that something's about to happen and it's going to be scary. I feel like that's where we're at right now. I feel like that's where planet Earth is right now. We have been going click, 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 all the way to the top. And maybe we're at the last like couple little clicks before we stop for about 30 seconds. Or maybe that's where we're at right now. Maybe we're at that 30-second mark. And I feel like, I want to know how many of you feel this way too. Any minute now, shit is going to pop off in such a crazy way that we aren't even going to know what to do. I really think that some huge thing is right around the corner, partly because my generation has just grown up with one emergency after another constantly happening. and the emergencies are getting crazier. There's wildfires in Canada. The skies in New York City turn red. California's on fire from top to bottom. The president says, rake the forest. What? Australia on fire. Monkeys getting so hot, the temperature is so off the charts, monkeys die in the trees and fall off the trees dead. Your shoes melting on the pavement because it's so hot in New Mexico and Las Vegas. Old Testament weather. Cats and dogs living together. Mass hysteria. It's crazy. The AI stuff. I know some people were like, don't talk about AI. That's not the focus of the channel. But guys, like the AI stuff is crazy right now. It's crazy. And it's right there in our rear view mirror. Like you can see it coming up in the rear view and it's creeping up. It's about ready to reach out and like grab you on the shoulder. In just a few years, this stuff is going to take over and it's going to be unbelievable how much it changes our day-to-day lives. Like that's happening. That's a non-human intelligence that we're going to have to contend with. Mark my words. Look, the capitalist system, capitalism is great when it's regulated and it works for the betterment of people. Okay. I just want to get that out there. Like I'm not like inherently against the idea of a marketplace and people owning businesses and private property. I think that's okay. But the way that we don't have that. What we have is this mutated, weird sort of ultra violent form of capitalism that's like a winner take all rigged system that's basically run by a few major banks that own everything. And that system is not going to produce artificial intelligence that is helpful, friendly, loving, caring, interested in your well-being. That system can only produce artificial intelligence that is going to supercharge that system. And what that system does is waste resources on making sexier underpants or more chocolatier chocolates or more squeezing more money out of the consumer or finding ways to like, God, the most crazy version of this I've seen recently is they had an AI system landlords in New York were using to basically analyze all the real estate listings and in real time float the numbers of basically the average value so that of square footage for residential property in the city and in the boroughs so that no matter where you go, you can't escape rising rent. The system that these landlords use to calculate the prices on their properties is synced with every other system across that space that all other landlords use. They basically all use the same kind of software. And so it's squeezing people so hard, they just can't stay in the rat race anymore and they have to leave. And you see this with like Jeff Bezos and these private banks buying up homes across the country. Here in the United States, I don't know how that's going in the UK or elsewhere in Europe, but we're seeing that here. AI is going to be used to supercharge this machine until it either breaks or it squeezes the very last drop of oil out of the head of the last dying dolphin and reduces everything that Mother Nature has to offer down to a cindering husk, a smoldering husk. And then that's it. Like this system burns itself out. But it's not the system that's going to get us through to the next epoch of human civilization, whatever that is going to look like. So anyway, that's a complicated, long, roundabout way of saying, I don't know what's happening, but I know it feels like there's a lot of crazy shit right around the corner and things are about to get really turbulent and weird. And I think the best way to protect yourself against that weirdness is to raise your level of consciousness, read, educate yourself, meditate, get away from the rat race, try as best you can, as best as possible to unplug from all that stuff and spend time focused on the things that are actually important in life. And I think that that's all any of us can do. But until then, until we get to whatever the future holds, it's really weird. It's really interesting. And it's a lot of fun to talk about. So I'm glad I can come here and talk to you guys about it. We are worse than the Klingons. Thanks, Wendy. Let's see what else. Burchett, well, see, totally agree. All right, gang. I'm going to wrap it up there. We've been going at this for an hour, and I think that's about all I've got for this afternoon. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. I'm going to try to start doing this on Mondays. I'm going to do like a live Monday thing every week, and these will get better. So stick with me while I figure this out. I have to kind of like work on my technique, but thanks for taking the time to watch this. Let me know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to reach out. You can email me. I've got some announcements coming up that are going to be really interesting. We're creeping up on 5,000 subscribers. And when I hit 5,000, I've got some exciting news for you guys, but I'm holding it back until I hit that 5,000. So I'll do a big announcement when we get there. In the meantime, thanks for participating in this chat. This was so cool. I've never done a live broadcast before, not really, not successfully. So this is my first one, and I'll be back to do more. We'll try to do them every Monday, and we'll see how that goes. I'm going to try to do another deep dive or two this week. It all depends on time. So let me know what you think in the comments. Reach out. Don't be afraid. Don't be a stranger. I'll catch you on the next one, and I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. See you soon. Keep looking up.